The swirling depths of space stretched endlessly beyond the reinforced windows of the EF's Dauntless, casting a peaceful backdrop to what would soon become a very confusing morning. Admiral Li Hyun sat in his command chair, savoring his first cup of coffee for the day. The bitter aroma helped chase away the last remnants of sleep as he reviewed the morning reports on his holographic display. The Dauntless had been patrolling this sector for the past 3 months, mainly overseeing the establishment of new mining operations and research outposts. It was routine work, boring even, but Hyun preferred boring to the alternative. The coffee was just reaching the perfect drinking temperature when the quiet bridge atmosphere was shattered. Communications Officer Park Jae-yun burst through the bridge doors, her normally pristine uniform slightly disheveled and her eyes wide with urgency. Several crew members turned to stare at her unusual entrance, but she paid them no mind as she rushed straight to the Admiral's station. "Admiral, sir," she called out, slightly out of breath. Her tablet was clutched tightly in her hands, its screen displaying a rapidly scrolling message in both Standard Galactic and Earth Common. "We're receiving a Priority 1 transmission from the Galactic Council." Hyun carefully set his coffee down, his full attention now focused on his communications officer. The Galactic Council rarely contacted individual ships directly, let alone with Priority 1 messages. Those were reserved for matters of extreme urgency or crisis. "The Council?" he asked, straightening in his chair. "What do they want?" Jae-yun's eyes scanned the message again, as if making sure she hadn't misread it. "Sir, they're requesting an immediate ceasefire." The bridge fell silent. Even the usual background hum of equipment seemed to quiet down as Hyun blinked twice, processing what he just heard. "A what now?" "A ceasefire, sir," Jae-yun repeated, her voice carrying clearly in the silent bridge. "They're formally requesting that humanity cease all military operations against Council space immediately." Executive Officer Kim Ta-won, who had been quietly working at his station, moved to stand beside the Admiral's chair. The two men exchanged bewildered looks, their expressions mirroring the confusion spreading across the bridge. "What war are they talking about?" Hyun asked, voicing the question on everyone's mind. Ta-won pulled up the ship's recent activity logs on his tablet. "Sir, we've had no combat engagements in this sector. The most aggressive action we've taken was warning off those salvage ships that got too close to the mining operation last week." "Check the fleet-wide reports," Hyun ordered, reaching for his now cooling coffee. "Maybe something's happening in another sector that we haven't heard about yet." Jae-yun's fingers flew across her console as she pulled up the latest military reports. "Nothing unusual, sir. Standard patrols, colony protection, research escort missions. The usual stuff." The Admiral stood up and walked to the main viewing screen, where the message from the Council was now displayed in full. The formal diplomatic language couldn't hide the urgent tone beneath the words. According to the Council, humanity had been engaged in aggressive military expansion for the past 3 years. 3 years, Hyun muttered, running a hand through his graying hair. "We've been at war for 3 years, and nobody thought to tell us." A young ensign cleared his throat. "Sir, maybe they're counting the Epsilon incident." "That was a pirate raid," Ta-won responded. "We were protecting our supply lines. Standard procedure." "Get me Earth Command," Hyun ordered, returning to his chair. "And someone wake up our diplomatic officer. I have a feeling we're going to need her expertise on this one." As the crew scrambled to establish the connection with Earth Command, Hyun picked up his coffee cup again, only to find it had gone completely cold. He stared into the dark liquid, his mind racing through possible explanations for this bizarre situation. "Sir," Jae-yun called out, "Earth Command is responding. Admiral Chen is coming online." The main screen flickered to life, showing the familiar face of Admiral Chen, who looked as confused as Hyun felt. Before either could speak, another Priority 1 message from the Council flashed across their screens. "They're requesting confirmation of our receipt of the ceasefire request," Jae-yun reported. "And, sir, they're asking for our surrender terms." Hyun shared another look with Ta-won, then turned back to Admiral Chen on the screen. "Ma'am, I believe we have a situation here, though I'm not entirely sure what that situation is." "Agreed," Chen responded, her image flickering slightly. "I've got similar messages coming in from all Council contact points. Apparently, we've been waging quite an impressive war without realizing it." As if to emphasize the absurdity of the situation, the ship's breakfast announcement chimed through the speakers, reminding everyone that the mess hall was now serving morning meals. Several crew members couldn't help but laugh at the mundane interruption to what was apparently a major diplomatic crisis. "Well," Hyun said, standing up again, "I suppose we should figure out exactly what war we've been fighting before we can agree to stop it." Jae-yun, "Acknowledge receipt of their message, but tell them we need clarification on the specific military actions they're referring to." Taiwan, "Get our diplomatic officer up here now, even if you have to drag her out of bed." And someone, he held up his cold coffee cup, "Please get me a fresh cup of coffee. I have a feeling this is going to be a very long day." The bridge crew sprang into action, their movements now carrying an extra sense of purpose. As Hyun watched them work, he couldn't help but wonder how humanity had managed to get itself into a war without even noticing. Whatever the explanation was, he had a feeling it would make for an interesting story. Assuming they could figure out what was going on in the first place. The stars twinkled against the dark canvas of space as Captain Song Minna stood on the bridge of the HSV Pioneer, watching her mining fleet set up their equipment around Proxima. The newly established colony needed resources, and these mineral-rich asteroids were perfect for their needs. Minna took pride in how efficiently her crew worked. They had already deployed 3 mining rigs and were preparing the 4th when the first signs of trouble appeared on their scanners. "Captain," called out Sensor Officer Lee Jae-ho, his voice carrying a note of concern. "I'm detecting multiple unknown vessels entering our operational space." Minna walked over to his station, studying the readings. The ships were unlike anything in their database, sleek, curved vessels that moved with unusual precision. "Send out standard greeting protocols," she ordered, following first contact procedures. The strange ships didn't respond to their hails. Instead, they took up positions around the mining fleet, their movements suggesting they were establishing a containment pattern. Tactical Officer Kang Duha's fingers flew across his console as he analyzed the situation. "Ma'am, their weapon systems are powering up. Energy signatures suggest they're charging some kind of plasma-based weaponry." Minna considered their options. The mining operation was vital for the colony's survival, and they had followed all proper procedures in claiming these resources. "Deploy defensive screens," she ordered calmly. "Continue operations as planned." "But Ma'am," Duha protested, "shouldn't we at least pull back and assess the situation?" "We have every right to be here," Minna replied, her voice firm but relaxed. "This is legally claimed human territory. If they have concerns, they can open diplomatic channels like civilized beings." The mining vessels continued their work, protected by their defensive screens. The alien ships maintained their threatening posture but didn't fire. After several tense hours, they finally withdrew. What Minna didn't know was that this incident was being carefully documented by the Galactic Council. In their records, it was marked as Incident 0. The first documented act of human aggression. Their report described how human forces had brazenly ignored superior firepower and continued their resource extraction operation, with complete disregard for established territorial claims. Similar incidents began occurring across human space. At the Newton Research Station, Dr. Park Sung-min and his team were studying the unique stellar phenomenon when 3 alien vessels appeared, demanding they evacuate the area. "This is a restricted zone," the alien message stated. "Depart immediately." Sung-min had simply adjusted his glasses and replied, "We've been planning this observation for 6 months. The star's going to enter its critical phase in less than an hour. We're not going anywhere." The aliens, expecting immediate compliance with their superior numbers, were baffled when the humans simply ignored their threats and continued their work. The research station's defensive systems easily handled the warning shots, and the scientists remained focused on their readings as if nothing unusual was happening. On the other side of human space, Survey Ship Horizon encountered similar resistance while mapping a new sector. Captain Kim Jun-seo received multiple warnings about entering protected space, but continued his mission nonetheless. "Sir," his navigator had said, "they seem quite insistent that we leave." Jun-seo had merely shrugged. "We filed all the proper exploration permits with Earth Command. If they have an issue, they can take it up with our diplomatic corps. We have work to do." Each of these incidents, and dozens more like them, were carefully documented by the Council. What humans saw as simple determination to complete their assigned tasks, the Council interpreted as displays of extraordinary military resolve. The Council's analysts were particularly troubled by how the humans seemed completely unfazed by shows of force. Their report noted, "Species displays unprecedented resistance to traditional intimidation tactics, continues operations even when faced with overwhelming opposition. Standard deterrence protocols prove ineffective." Back on the Pioneer, Minna's mining operation had finished ahead of schedule despite the alien interference. As she filed her report, she included only a brief mention of the encounter, listing it as a minor disruption to standard operations. "Should we request additional security for future operations?" Duha asked as they prepared to return to the colony. Minna thought about it for a moment. "Noted in the report, but I don't think it's necessary. They didn't actually do anything except waste their fuel flying around us." This casual dismissal of what the Council considered a serious show of force would later be cited as evidence of humanity's extraordinary military confidence. The Council's analysts would spend months trying to understand how a supposedly minor species could display such complete disregard for established power structures. What none of them realized was that humans weren't trying to be aggressive or intimidating. They were simply being human, stubborn, focused, and unwilling to be deterred from their goals by mere threats. As the incidents continued to pile up, the Council began to see patterns that weren't there. They interpreted human persistence as military strategy, human stubbornness as tactical brilliance, and human directness as diplomatic manipulation. Meanwhile, humans across space continued their work, largely unaware that their actions were being viewed as calculated military maneuvers. They built their colonies, conducted their research, and explored new territories, treating alien interference as just another obstacle to work around, like bad weather or equipment malfunctions. This fundamental misunderstanding would continue to grow, leading to increasingly confused interactions between humans and the Council races. Each side viewed the same events through completely different lenses, creating a situation that would eventually require a ceasefire to a war that one side didn't even know they were fighting. The Grand Council chamber sparkled with light reflected from its crystal dome, casting rainbow patterns across the assembled delegates. Representative Yoon Han stood at the central podium, trying not to show her growing bewilderment as she flipped through the stack of reports on her tablet. The chamber itself was impressive, a vast circular room with rising tiers of seats occupied by representatives from hundreds of spacefaring species. Some floated in containment fields filled with their native atmospheres, while others sat in specially designed chairs to accommodate their unique physiologies. Under normal circumstances, Hayan would have been fascinated by the diversity around her. Right now, however, she was too confused by the accusations being leveled against humanity. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," she said, speaking slowly to give the universal translators time to convey her words accurately. "You're saying that we've been at war for 3 years." The Council elder, a tall being with iridescent scales and multiple sets of eyes, made a gesture that the translator interpreted as extreme frustration. "Your species has systematically expanded across 17 sectors, brushing aside all opposition as if it were insignificant. The evidence is undeniable." Hayan glanced at her assistant, Park Min-ho, who looked equally puzzled. "We've been setting up mining colonies and research stations," she explained, trying to keep her voice level. This is standard expansion protocol. We filed all the proper paperwork. A ripple of what might have been laughter, or possibly outrage, went through the assembly. The elder's scales shifted to a deeper shade of blue. You call the complete route of the Third Fleet standard protocol. Oh, Hatton's expression cleared as she realized what they were referring to. You mean the Epsilon incident. Those were pirates harassing our supply lines. We just dealt with them. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of sounds as various species expressed their disbelief. Minho leaned closer to Han and whispered, I think we might have different definitions of dealing with situations. The elder raised all four arms for silence. You destroyed or disabled 17 warships, captured their base of operations, and turned it into a research station. All within 6 hours. Well, yes, Han replied. They were disrupting our supply shipments to the outer colonies. People were waiting for those supplies. She paused, then added, besides, the base had excellent facilities for studying spatial anomalies. It would have been a waste to just leave it empty. Another council member, a being composed primarily of crystalline structures, joined the discussion. What about the Gamma Sector standoff? Your research vessel refused to withdraw even when confronted by a battle group. Hayen checked her notes. That was the solar flare study. Yes, our scientists had been preparing for that event for months. They weren't about to abandon their observations just because someone showed up and started making demands. They were in a restricted zone. The crystalline being chimed, its facets flashing with agitation. They had filed their research permits 6 months in advance, Han countered. If there was an issue with the paperwork, the proper procedure would have been to file a complaint through diplomatic channels, not send warships. The elder's scales shifted through several colors before settling on a deep purple. Your species' casual disregard for shows of force is disturbing. You treat battleships like minor inconveniences. Well, they were being inconvenient, Han pointed out. Our people had work to do. Minho coughed softly beside her, passing her a note on his tablet. Han read it quickly and blinked in surprise. According to the Council's records, humanity had established dominance over more territory in 3 years than most species managed in a century of deliberate expansion. I'm beginning to see the problem, she said carefully. I think there's been a significant cultural misunderstanding here. When we say we're conducting peaceful expansion, we mean exactly that. The fact that we don't back down when threatened doesn't make it warfare. It just means we're stubborn. You captured 3 military outposts last month. Someone called from the upper tiers. No, we established 3 new research stations, Han corrected. If there were military outposts there, they really should have filed their presence with the proper authorities. The chamber fell silent as the implications of her words sank in. Humanity hadn't been waging a war. They had simply been going about their business with typical human determination, completely disregarding any attempts to stop them. Perhaps, the elder said finally, its scales shifting to a thoughtful shade of green, we should discuss how to better integrate human expansion protocols with existing galactic guidelines. That would be helpful, Han agreed. Though I should warn you, we have several dozen new research missions and mining operations planned for the next few months. All the paperwork has already been filed. The crystalline being chimed in distress. Those areas are all currently occupied by various powers. Well, Han said with a slight smile, they might want to file their paperwork then. Our scientists can get quite grumpy when their schedules are disrupted. As the council chamber erupted into another round of excited discussion, Minho leaned over again. Should we tell them about the deep space exploration missions we're planning? Han watched the already agitated alien representatives and shook her head slightly. Let's save that for the next meeting. I think they've had enough surprises for one day. Defense Minister Choi Jun sat in his office overlooking the Seoul skyline, trying his best not to laugh as he read through the collection of incident reports spread across his desk. The morning sun streamed through the windows, highlighting the amused expression on his face as he flipped through another page. Beside him, military analyst Nam Hee-jun stood with a tablet in hand, scrolling through the translated council records they had received. The young analyst had spent the last 3 days organizing and comparing the council's version of events with their own records, and the results were nothing short of hilarious. "Minister, you really need to see this one," Hee-jun said, highlighting a particular entry. "According to council records, our biggest military operation was actually the Beta Centauri research station incident." Jun looked up from his papers, raising an eyebrow. "Beta Centauri? Wasn't that just a weather issue?" "A solar storm," Hee-jun confirmed, grinning. "Apparently, our scientists' refusal to evacuate during the storm was interpreted as an act of extreme military defiance. The council thought we were demonstrating our superior defensive capabilities. They were probably just trying to finish their experiments," Jun mused, leaning back in his chair. "You know how researchers get when they're close to a breakthrough. Remember Dr. Kim from the Quantum Physics Division? We practically had to drag her out of the lab when that reactor started overheating." "Exactly," Hee-jun nodded, pulling up more records. "What we saw as routine stubbornness, they saw as incredible military resolve. There's more. Remember the mining operation in Sector 7? Jun shuffled through his papers until he found the relevant report. "The one where our miners kept working through that asteroid storm?" "Yes. The council interpreted that as a display of superior shield technology and combat determination. They thought we were demonstrating our ability to operate under extreme battlefield conditions. They were behind schedule and trying to meet their quotas," Jun chuckled, shaking his head. "Half of them probably didn't even notice the asteroids." Hee-jun moved to the large display screen on the wall, bringing up a series of mapped incidents. "The pattern is fascinating, sir. Every time our people simply refused to be interrupted or intimidated, the council saw it as a calculated military action." The screen showed dozens of dots spread across known space, each representing what the council had classified as a military engagement. Jun stood up and walked closer, studying the pattern. "Look at this one." He pointed to a blinking dot near the Carina Nebula. "Wasn't this just a routine survey mission?" "Yes, sir. The survey ship encountered what they thought was a natural phenomenon blocking their path. They spent 3 days finding a way around it. And the council's interpretation, they claim our ships demonstrated advanced stealth capabilities and strategic excellence in penetrating their defensive barrier." But Jun could barely keep the laughter out of his voice. It wasn't even their barrier. It was just a random cosmic string they were studying. Jun walked back to his desk and picked up his coffee mug, taking a thoughtful sip. "So every time we've simply gone about our business. They've seen it as a carefully planned military campaign." "Yes," Hee-jun finished. "The council seems unable to comprehend that we're just persistent." "Show me the Epsilon incident records," Jun requested, returning to his chair. Hee-jun pulled up the relevant files. "This one's particularly interesting. When our patrol ships eliminated those pirates, the council saw it as a demonstration of overwhelming military might. In reality, those ships were carrying medical supplies to our outer colonies, and the crew was annoyed about being delayed." Jun finished, remembering the incident report. "Captain Park was worried about the vaccines spoiling if they took too long. The council's analysis suggests we were showing off our advanced weapons technology. They spent months trying to figure out how we had achieved such tactical superiority." Jun leaned forward, resting his elbows on his desk. "And all this time, we've just been being human," Hee-jun said with a smile. "Going about our business, solving problems as they come up, and refusing to let obstacles stop us from doing our jobs." The defense minister stood up again, walking to the window. Below, Seoul's morning traffic moved in its usual patterns, people going about their daily routines just as humanity's space crews went about theirs among the stars. "Do we have any active military operations at the moment?" he asked, using air quotes around the council's terminology. Hee-jun consulted his tablet. Well, there's a research team studying a pulsar in what the Council considers restricted space, 3 mining operations in disputed territories, and a deep space survey mission that's apparently violating about 6 different species' territorial claims. And none of them have any idea they're participating in military operations. No, sir. The research team's latest report just complains about their coffee machine breaking down. June turned back from the window, a smile playing on his face. Perhaps we should arrange a cultural exchange program with the Council. Help them understand that not everything is about military might. That might be difficult, sir, June replied. According to their latest assessment, our casual attitude toward their military power is our most terrifying weapon. Both men looked at each other for a moment before breaking into laughter. Outside, the morning sun continued to rise over Seoul, its citizens going about their business with typical human determination, just like their counterparts among the stars. Space Station Harmony lived up to its name with its elegant architecture and peaceful atmosphere, but today an unusual tension filled its main conference chamber. Diplomatic Corps leader Oh Soo-jin sat at one end of the long crystalline table, her dark blue uniform crisp and neat, while a collection of alien representatives occupied the other side, their various environmental suits and containment fields creating a striking display. Soo-jin had spent the morning reviewing the massive file of military incidents provided by the Council, and with each page, her bewilderment had grown. Now, facing the alien delegation, she struggled to maintain her diplomatic composure while processing the sheer absurdity of the situation. "Let me get this straight," she said, carefully choosing her words as the universal translators hummed softly in the background. "Every time we ignored your warnings and continued our work, you thought we were demonstrating military superiority." The Council's primary spokesperson, a tall being with crystalline features that caught the station's lights in rainbow patterns, leaned forward. "Your species refused to yield despite overwhelming opposition," it stated, its translated voice carrying a mix of fear and respect. "The logical conclusion was that you possessed military might beyond our understanding. We're just persistent," Soo-jin explained, spreading her hands on the table. "It's kind of our thing." Her assistant, Kim Dae-sung, quietly placed another data pad in front of her, highlighting a particular incident. Soo-jin read it quickly, her eyebrows rising slightly. "This incident with the gas giant research station," she said, looking up at the delegates. "You deployed a battle fleet because our scientists wouldn't evacuate." A delegate with flowing tentacles rippled in what might have been agitation. They were in the path of a Class 5 storm system. No species would risk their people in such conditions without overwhelming military confidence. Soo-jin glanced at Dae-sung, who was trying very hard not to smile. "Have you ever tried to tell a group of scientists to abandon their research right before a major astronomical event? The storm would have destroyed any normal installation." Another delegate chimed in, their bioluminescent patches pulsing with emphasis. "Oh, that." Soo-jin nodded, checking her notes. "Yes, they reinforced the station's shields the week before. The engineering team was quite proud of their work. They saw the storm as a perfect opportunity to test their improvements." The chamber fell silent as the aliens processed this information. The crystalline spokesperson's facets shifted through several colors before settling on a deep blue. "You modified your defensive systems just to continue research?" it asked slowly. "Well, yes," Soo-jin replied. The team had spent months preparing for their observations. They weren't about to let a little bad weather stop them. The tentacled delegate rippled again. A little bad weather. The storm had wind speeds exceeding 700 kilometers per second, which made it perfect for studying atmospheric dynamics, Soo-jin pointed out. "I believe they published quite an impressive paper afterward." Dae-sung discreetly passed her another note. Soo-jin read it and had to cough to cover a laugh. "I see here that you also classify our mining operation in the Karina sector as a military occupation. You seized control of an entire asteroid field." The bioluminescent delegate pulsed brightly. "We filed mining claims," Soo-jin corrected gently. All the paperwork was submitted 6 months in advance. If other parties were interested in those resources, they should have filed competing claims through the proper channels. "We sent warships," the Crystalline spokesperson stated flatly. "And we sent a strongly worded complaint to the bureaucratic office about improper interference with licensed mining operations," Su Jin replied. "The paperwork for that complaint, by the way, took longer to file than it did for our miners to finish their work." The alien delegates huddled together, their translators working overtime as they discussed this new perspective. Su Jin took the opportunity to review more of the incident reports, each one making it clearer how this misunderstanding had escalated so dramatically. "Perhaps," the Crystalline spokesperson said finally, "we should discuss how to prevent such misunderstandings in the future." "That would be helpful," Su Jin agreed. "Though I should warn you, we have several deep space expeditions planned for next year, all properly documented and filed, of course." The tentacled delegate rippled in what might have been alarm. "Through the Sagittarius Void, that's considered uncrossable. Our scientists are quite excited about studying it," Su Jin said with a small smile. "They've already started modifying the shields." The bioluminescent delegate's patches flashed rapidly. "You cannot simply modify technology to overcome natural barriers." "Actually," Dae-sung spoke up for the first time, "that's exactly what we do. It's called engineering." Su Jin watched as the alien representatives tried to process this fundamental aspect of human nature. Their species saw insurmountable obstacles where humans saw interesting challenges. Their military might meant nothing against humanity's simple refusal to be deterred. "Perhaps," she suggested kindly, "we should take a break and resume discussions after lunch. I believe the station's cafeteria has been modified to accommodate all of your environmental needs." As the delegates filed out, still discussing among themselves, Dae-sung leaned closer to Su Jin. "Should we tell them about the planned expedition to the Galactic core?" Su Jin watched the retreating aliens and shook her head slightly. "Let's save that for the next meeting. I think they've had enough surprises for one day." Through the conference room's large windows, Earth could be seen as a distant blue marble, a reminder of humanity's first home and the persistent spirit that had driven them to the stars. Su Jin smiled, knowing that this same spirit, which had so thoroughly confused the galactic community, would continue to drive their species forward, one stubborn step at a time. The presentation room in the Galactic Council's headquarters buzzed with anticipation as senior analyst Im Dae-jung set up his holographic display. Representatives from various species filled the tiered seating, their environmental suits and containment fields creating a colorful array of shapes and sizes. Dae-jung glanced at his notes one final time before looking up at the assembled audience. The title of his presentation floated in the air above him in multiple languages. "Accidental Conquest. A Study in Human Persistence. Thank you all for coming today," he began, as the universal translators carried his words to every being present. "What I'm about to share may change how we understand interspecies relations forever." The first hologram showed a map of human expansion over the past 3 years, with each new settlement, research station, and mining operation marked in glowing blue dots. Overlaid in red were the various military responses these activities had triggered. "The fundamental issue appears to be perspective," Dae-jung explained, gesturing to the map. What alien species saw as calculated military actions were actually just humans being humans. We didn't retreat because it simply didn't occur to us to do so. A ripple of movement went through the alien delegates. Several of them shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A representative from the crystalline species raised an appendage. "Are you suggesting that your species' military strategy was accidental?" "Not exactly accidental," Dae-jung replied, bringing up his next display. "More like incidental. Let me show you an example." The hologram changed to show footage from the Beta Centauri incident. A research station could be seen maintaining its position despite an approaching solar storm and several alien warships. "From your perspective, this looked like a show of military might," Dae-jung explained. In reality, Dr. Lee and her team were 30 minutes away from completing a critical experiment. When the evacuation order came, she reportedly said, and I quote, "Just 5 more minutes," and turned off the communication system. A collective gasp went through the audience. A delegate with tentacles rippled in agitation. She ignored a direct order from a superior force. She ignored an interruption to her work schedule. Jung corrected. The difference might seem subtle to you, but it's crucial to understanding human behavior. He switched to another display, this one showing multiple incidents side by side. Look at these events. In each case, humans encountered what you considered to be overwhelming force or insurmountable obstacles. But from our perspective, these were simply inconveniences. The bioluminescent delegate's patches flashed rapidly. You crossed the void of sorrows because it was inconvenient to go around. Well, yes, Jung nodded. The survey team had a deadline to meet. Taking a detour would have put them behind schedule. He brought up another set of data, this time showing various species' responses to obstacles compared to human reactions. Our casual approach to obstacles you considered insurmountable has completely redefined their understanding of species classification. A smaller alien near the front raised all 4 of its appendages. But surely you must have realized the military implications of your actions. Jung paused, considering how to explain. Let me put it this way. When you see a closed door, you might consider who closed it and why, what authority they had to close it, and what military might they possess to keep it closed. When humans see a closed door, we typically just check if it's locked, and if it is, we start looking for another way through. He switched to a new display, showing the expansion of human space over time. We didn't set out to challenge anyone's military authority. We just had things to do and places to be. The fact that these places were supposedly restricted or impossible to reach was irrelevant to the people doing the work. The crystalline delegate's facets shifted through several colors. Are you saying that all of our military posturing was about as effective as telling a researcher their funding would be cut? Jung finished. Which, I should note, is also surprisingly ineffective. The room erupted in a mixture of sounds as various species tried to process this information. Jung waited patiently, switching to his next slide, which showed the various military encounters reclassified as what they actually were, mostly minor inconveniences to human work schedules. The mining operation in Sector 7 wasn't a military occupation, he explained. The miners just had quotas to meet. The deep space expedition wasn't a show of force. The scientists were curious about what was out there. And the Epsilon incident. Those ships were carrying coffee supplies to our outer colonies. Have you ever seen what happens when a research station runs out of coffee? The alien delegates looked at each other nervously. One of them asked, "Is this coffee some kind of superweapon?" "No," Jung smiled. "Though some of our scientists might disagree. It's just that humans tend to get rather focused on completing their tasks, and they don't like being interrupted." He brought up his final slide, showing recommendations for future human-alien interactions. Moving forward, I suggest we establish better communication channels. If you have concerns about human activities in your space, try filing a complaint through proper bureaucratic channels. It won't stop us, but at least we'll have the paperwork sorted out properly. As the presentation concluded, the alien delegates sat in stunned silence. Jung could almost see them reevaluating every interaction they'd had with humans, realizing that what they had interpreted as calculated military genius had simply been human stubbornness in action. "Are there any questions?" he asked, knowing there would be many. The forest of raised appendages, tentacles, and glowing patches that followed proved him right. Humanity's accidental conquest of space would take some explaining, but at least they were finally starting to understand each other. The United Nations Assembly Hall in New York sparkled under the bright lights, its walls adorned with flags from both Earth nations and various alien species. Ambassador Baek Jin-ho stood at the podium, trying his best to keep a straight face as he prepared to sign what might be the most unusual peace treaty in human history. Delegates from across the galaxy filled the hall, their environmental suits and containment fields creating a spectacular display of colors and shapes. The air hummed with the software of universal translators and environmental control systems. Jinho's aide, Park Minji, stood nearby with the official documents, her expression professionally neutral despite the absurdity of the situation. The treaty before them was titled Resolution of Misunderstandings and Establishment of Peaceful Coexistence, though Jinho privately thought it should have been called How Humans Accidentally Scared the Galaxy. While we appreciate the formal peace treaty, Jinho addressed the assembled council members, his voice carrying clearly through the translators. I want to reiterate that we were never at war. We were just going about our business. The council elder, a beam of shifting crystalline patterns, moved forward to sign their portion of the treaty. Your business has reshaped the political landscape of 17 sectors. 18 now, actually, Minji whispered, checking her tablet. Jinho managed not to laugh, but his smile widened slightly. The treaty itself was a fascinating document. It created a new classification for humanity. Unintentionally, expansionist species. This unique category came with its own set of protocols and guidelines, specifically noting that human persistence should not automatically be considered military action. As Jinho signed his name with a flourish, he couldn't help but recall some of the incidents that had led to this moment. The research team that had ignored an alien blockade because they were too busy studying a pulsar. The mining operation that had accidentally claimed an entire asteroid field because the crew was trying to meet their quarterly quotas. The survey ship that had mapped a supposedly restricted sector because their captain thought the keep-out buoys were malfunctioning. The treaty included several interesting provisions. Alien species were advised to file complaints through proper bureaucratic channels rather than sending warships, as humans tended to respond better to paperwork than threats. There was also a special clause about not interrupting human scientific research, with a specific mention of coffee supplies being considered essential resources rather than military provisions. As the ceremony concluded, Jinho turned to Minji and whispered, "Did you know we apparently conquered 3 sectors last month?" The research team was looking for a good spot to study neutron stars and just ignored all the warning buoys. "Should we tell them to stop?" Minji asked, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "Why? They're about to make a breakthrough in stellar mechanics." The reception following the signing was an interesting affair. Various alien delegates approached Jinho, many still trying to understand how humanity had managed to accidentally become a major galactic power. "Your species' ability to ignore impossible obstacles is disturbing," one delegate commented, their bioluminescent patches pulsing with confusion. "We prefer to think of it as optimistic persistence," Jinho replied diplomatically. "If something seems impossible, we usually assume we just haven't found the right approach yet." Another delegate, this one floating in a containment field, asked about humanity's plans for future expansion. Jinho shared a knowing look with Minji before responding. "We have several research projects ongoing," he said carefully. "Our scientists are quite interested in studying various phenomena across the galaxy. Of course, all proper paperwork will be filed." The fact that the paperwork would be filed after the research was already underway went unmentioned. As the reception wound down, Jinho stood by one of the large windows overlooking New York City. The setting sun cast long shadows between the skyscrapers, a reminder of humanity's first steps toward the stars. "Sir," Minji approached with her tablet, "we just received word from the Carina Deep Space Research Station. They've discovered something interesting beyond the Sagittarius Void." "Let me guess," Jinho smiled. "It's in restricted space. Several species claim sovereignty over that sector," she confirmed. "Should I start preparing the diplomatic responses?" Jinho watched as several alien delegates hurried past, already discussing the implications of the treaty they'd just signed. "File the expedition paperwork first," he decided. By the time anyone objects, the research team will probably have already set up their equipment. As the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky, Jin-Ho reflected on humanity's accidental rise to galactic prominence. They hadn't set out to challenge anyone's authority or demonstrate military might. They had simply been doing what humans had always done, pushing boundaries, asking questions, and refusing to take impossible for an answer. The peace treaty might help prevent future misunderstandings, but it wouldn't change human nature. Somewhere out there, a research team was probably already ignoring warning buoys, a survey ship was mapping restricted space, or a mining crew was claiming resources in disputed territory. And that, Jin-Ho thought with a smile, was exactly how it should be.